Hi, my name is Mr. Evangelista, and welcome to another episode of Evangelista Science, where we are going to get our learning on today. Today we're going to be talking about the concept of cellular respiration. So can you guess what I'm trying to draw here? I'll give you a second. No, it is not a Christmas tree. It is actually a lightning bolt, and if you put a circle around it, it represents the symbol for the flash. Now, this flash is important in our concepts today because the flash can run near the speed of light. And in order to do this, scientists have calculated that he needs to be eating about 1,000 cheeseburgers a second to maintain the energy that his muscles would need to get him running at these speeds. Now, there's this word that's been going around pretty recently. It's this word hangry, and it represents how your cells feel when there is not enough energy in your body. Now, cells have been doing this way before the invention of the word hangry. Cellular respirations has been going on since almost the beginning of life. And so let's take a look at the equation that allows this to happen. So we've got C6H12O6, which is glucose, and that is one of the inputs that we need to create energy. So this is all about creating energy. We're also going to need oxygen to create this energy. And in the end, a couple of byproducts that we see are CO2 and H2O. And we get at the end ATP, or this battery that the cell uses. We're also going to refer to it as the big bucks. Cells cannot do anything without ATP, so this is kind of like the currency or the money of the cell. Now, one interesting thing, one of the outputs of cellular respiration is water, and we see this whenever we take a breath outside. You ever go up to a mirror or a piece of glass and you blow on the glass with your breath? The water particles will start to adhere or stick to the glass. On a cold day, if you go out in the morning and you blow out your breath on a cold morning day, you can see that you're kind of like a water bender breathing out like a dragon, and you can see your breath out in the air, and that's all evidence that we are breathing out water. Okay, so cellular respiration is going to be divided into 3 steps. And the first step we're going to talk about is glycolysis. Now, what happens in glycolysis is we take glucose, and all we're going to do is glucose is a 6-carbon molecule. And all we're going to do is we're going to split it in half into 3 carbon molecules called pyruvate. Now, we were talking about ATP being the currency of the cell. And cells also follow this concept that you kind of sometimes have to spend money to make money. So in this process, we actually have to jump-start the process by spending 2 ATP. Luckily, in the end, that gives us 4 ATP, and so we get a total net gain of 2 ATP. We spent 2, but we got 4 out of it. Also, we get these 2 NADH molecules, which are carrying electrons, and we'll see why those are important later. This is all happening, by the way, in the cytoplasm of the cell, or the fluid in which all of the organelles are floating around in. Now, this step is very useful because it doesn't require oxygen to continue. However, when we move to the other steps, we will require oxygen. If we do not have oxygen, the next step that we're going to take is we're going to have to produce lactic acid, which our body does not want. And so with oxygen, we actually get into the mitochondria where we can start making the big bucks. Again, glycolysis made 2 ATP, but in terms of cellular energy, that's chump change. And we really need oxygen to get the big bucks, the big outputs out of our sugar molecule. So let's take a look at a mitochondria. Again, these steps are going to happen when we have oxygen. So these steps can only happen with oxygen, and that's when we're going to get the big bucks. So here's a mitochondria. It's shaped like a bean. By the way, what did the mitochondria say to his first love when they first met? He said, "Where you been all my life?" All right, and so the mitochondria, just like the chloroplast, has a double membrane. So we have an outer membrane, and we also have an inner membrane. The inner membrane looks kind of weird here. It's got a bunch of these folds in it, and these folds are called cristae. Now, the reason that they have these folds is because they want to increase the amount of area that they have to conduct cellular respiration. It's kind of like if you're baking a brownie The best part of the brownie is, of course, the edges of the brownie. And so if you were to increase the amount of edges, then you would get more of that delicious kind of crunchy edge of the brownie. Cellular respiration has 3 steps. The first step is glycolysis. Now we're moving into the Krebs cycle. And what the Krebs cycle does is that pyruvate molecule enters the mitochondria into this inner space called the matrix. And it's going to enter the Krebs cycle. And out of the Krebs cycle, we're going to make carbon dioxide, which is one of our outputs that we breathe out. We're also going to make 2 ATP, and we're going to make more of these energy carriers, NADH, and this new energy carrier that we see, FADH2. Now, the difference between these energy carriers, FADH is not as good as an energy carrier as NADH. NADH is the better energy carrier. Just think of NADH as Mr. E, the best YouTuber and biology teacher out there, and think of FADH2 as all of those other YouTubers out there or all those other science teachers that you've had previously. NADH is Mr. E because he is the best. Okay, and so that's the Krebs cycle. Again, it's going to make 2 ATP, which is, not so hot when you're talking about the big bucks. It's still useful, but the next step is where we're really going to make some gains. And so these 2 energy carriers, FADH2 and NADH, are going to go to the inner membrane. And in the inner membrane, those electrons are going to get dropped off at this proton pump, this hydrogen pump. And when these electrons get to this hydrogen pump, they're going to start pumping these hydrogens across the membrane. And so all those hydrogens are going to start to build up on the inner part of this membrane. The high concentration of hydrogen on one side isn't going to want to stay there. And so they're going to diffuse across this protein called ATP synthase. When they cross across the ATP synthase, this is what generates a lot of ATP. It's kind of like water going through a turbine. As it goes through this ATP synthase, it kind of turns this mechanism, which generates a lot of energy. And bam, this step, ready for it, generates a total of about 32 ATP. And again, we made 2 ATP in glycolysis, 2 ATP in the Krebs cycle, but 32 ATP as part of this last step, which we call the electron transport chain. One last thing we got to talk about, these electrons that we use to pump these hydrogens across, they are going to be absorbed by our molecule oxygen, which is why oxygen is needed for this process to take place.